All right, welcome back, everybody. This is part three. The saga continues for classical conditioning. We've got past the hard part. We're just going to focus on a few other factors that are related to classical conditioning. And what are the uses? Where do we see classical conditioning in our day-to-day lives? So the first thing, what are some other factors that influence classical conditioning? You can see here one of these is the idea of timing. So forward conditioning, that's just what we mean by having, I'm kind of using the Pavlov example of going bell, then food, bell, then food. So there's also backwards conditioning, which would be food, then bell, food, then bell. And what we found is that that doesn't really do much because, again, the goal of classical conditioning is to allow you to anticipate the future. The bell really is of very little use to you if you've already gotten the food. So forward conditioning, what we what we consider to be normal classical conditioning is the most effective. So yeah, backward doesn't really work. At the same time, having the food and the bell at the same time doesn't really do anything either, so pretty much useless. The predictability. So if there's a high predictability, meaning every time you ring the bell, you get food, that's going to be more effective than if it's just some of the time. So you ring the bell and then some of the time the dog gets the food. That's not as effective as if it's every single time. The strength of the signal. So strength of, in this case, what would be the food or the bell. So like if you think about the example of like food poisoning. So if you go out to a restaurant and you eat a burger and then you come home and you got a little bit of a tummy ache, maybe you're a little bit gassy, you might be like a little bit uncomfortable, but you'll probably go back to that restaurant. But if you go out to eat and you just get straight up food poisoning and you're just throwing up for the next couple of days, you probably won't. So the signal of the food poisoning is stronger than the signal of, oh, well, I got a little bit uncomfortable from going out to this restaurant. So the stronger the stimulus, the more effective it's going to be. And then just think about attention. What are you focused on at the time? So if they would have rang the bell, but then, put something else out there, like played music or whatever the dog was focused on, that is what they're going to associate with the food. So what you're paying attention to is what's most likely to be paired with the unconditioned stimulus. Another term that's kind of interesting, we see this a lot in day-to-day life. It's called second order, or I think the book might even call it higher order conditioning. So what happens is the conditioned stimulus, the bell, and with Pavlov's example, becomes so well learned, so well ingrained that it actually acts like an unconditioned stimulus. So with Pavlov's study, they were able to, bell food, bell food, bell food, but then they would flash a light, then ring the bell, then give food. And after doing that several times, the light would elicit salivation because the dog's anticipated light means that the bell's going to ring and then I'm going to get food. So it's just adding another step to the chain of classical conditioning. So there's an example here on the slide. So if you could actually learn to fear being in a doctor's office or fearing looking at a doctor's white coat, because that signals that you're eventually going to, get a shot or something. So you will associate the room with the doctor and the doctor with the shot. So you're just adding layers and layers to the conditioning. Some other things with biology and classical conditioning. One, understand that humans are more biologically prepared to link some stimuli than others. So we have a natural tendency to link foods with getting nauseous because those things kind of go together. Things that we ingest and then eventually feeling sick to our stomach. Our body kind of knows like, hey, those things go together. We're more likely to associate the fear of like a shock or the wincing to a shock with lights, because we kind of intuitively know that electricity and light, they go together. And then there's what's called instinctive drift. So like you can train someone to associate something that doesn't naturally go together, but it's not going to be as strong, and eventually we'll kind of drift back to our instincts of understanding that like, okay, this Flashing light probably is not going to cause me to feel nauseous, because those things just don't really go together. So there does seem to be kind of like a biological override for things that don't really, naturally go together. Some applications, we see this all the time. Like, this is such a ubiquitous, common thing in our lives, and you may not even realize it. But one, the placebo effect comes from classical conditioning. So you associate taking a pill with getting better. Just taking, with the placebo effect, just taking the pill can actually activate certain chemical responses in your body and help you show improvement, because again, it's the power of the mind. You've taken a pill, so that sets a chain of thoughts in your mind, and that could actually lead to the release of certain hormones that make you feel better. We see it so much in marketing. I mean, you could spend a whole class on this, but just think of any commercial where a product is being paired with or associated with something positive. I always think about the cheesy, like, old Axe body spray commercials where the guy like sprays Axe body spray on himself, and then all these hot women like just tackle him and want to get with him, and it's ridiculous, but they wouldn't do it if it didn't work. So you see classical conditioning a lot in marketing. Think about like fast food, McDonald's, Happy Meals. You learn to associate at a young age, like the Happy Meal, the toy with the food, and then the good feelings you had as a kid at McDonald's, and then they use that to market to you later on in life. The McDonald's arches are associated with the restaurant, and then that's associated with the food. So just, seeing the commercials, famous people, you associate a famous person with a product, and if you have a good connotation of that famous person, you'll have a more positive feel for the product as well. So lots of marketing. We see this with phobias. A lot of phobias begin with classical conditioning. So you have something happen right before you get afraid, and so you assume like, this thing must be causing me to be afraid. And you think about like spiders or something. Maybe when you were a kid, you had a spider bite you, or you got tangled up in a spider web, and so now you associate all spiders with the fear you had when you got tangled in the spider web. Or, my example is when I was a kid, I stepped on a bumblebee and it stung me. And so now that phobia has, generalized to all bees. Just being around bees, makes me, afraid. I've gotten a lot better now. But I mean, I had a stretch when I was a kid when I was pretty afraid of bees. The good news is, while a lot of phobias begin with classical conditioning, they can also be treated with classical conditioning. And we'll later in the course talk more in depth, but systematic desensitization. So instead of associating bees or spiders with something negative, you change the association. So instead of, I see a spider and it creates, the emotion of fear, they try to change that association. So they have you look at the spider and then go through a relaxation exercise. And then they actually build up. So it might start with something small, like just looking at a picture of a spider. And then they might have a rubber spider in the room with you. But eventually, they would have you in a room with a spider, and even maybe a spider crawling up your arm. And you would be okay with that. But you would do it slowly and gradually, and you would replace the negative condition response with something more positive. And eventually, the condition stimulus doesn't lead to the condition response. You go through the extinction process, basically. I'll leave you with a story. It's a story that, as a psychology teacher, I think I'm actually required to tell you in Psych 101. This is the little Albert study. So little Albert, he was a baby. His mom was a nurse. I think he was about 8 months old. And they bring him in, and they bring in these little fuzzy animals. I think it was a bunny rabbit, and they're like, "Hey, pet the bunny rabbit, cute little bunny rabbit." And then as he's doing that, right behind him, they take these cymbals and they clang them together. And they do this repeatedly, and they basically train poor little Albert to fear like bunny rabbits. And eventually that fear generalizes to all soft, furry things. So like any kind of comfort toy or like a doll or whatever, he was afraid of those. Um, and mom finds out about it. She's super ticked off, and she takes the kid and she quits her job as a nurse. And because they don't get permission. John Watson's actually the one that does this, and they don't get permission, and they train this poor kid, and then they don't. But mom takes the kid and leaves, and they don't get a chance to counter condition, to kind of go through the extinction process. So it's kind of like a legend in psychology. What happened to poor little Albert? There's some stories that suggest maybe he died, not because of this, but like he died as a child, like at around 8 or 9. But there's some that like maybe this kid went the rest of his life and was terrified of soft bunny rabbits and had no idea why. Other than just being an interesting story, I think the takeaway is, now that you know a lot about classical conditioning, use the force for good. I always get a lot of students who are like, oh, I'm going to go train my brother, I'm going to train my friend, and whatever. And just remember the ethics of research. So use the power for good. Don't go around using this to harm people. Usually that's not an issue, but there's always a couple people that like have mischievous ideas. So hopefully you can see that classical conditioning is a very important form of learning. You may not even be aware that it's happening, but we use it all the time. So we'll talk more examples in class and answer your questions, but thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.